Professor Loren Samons, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. I have to say that Professor Samons is a Vice President for Strategic Initiatives and Executive Director, Institute for Hellenic Culture and the Liberal Arts of the American College of Greece. And also he's a Professor of Classical Studies at the Boston University. Professor Samons, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
As a Vice President for Strategic Initiatives of the American College of Greece, you helped to implement the college's strategic plan to utilize education and research for economic and social impact in Greece. The plan's initiatives include new institutes and centers of excellence designed to foster research, international collaboration, undergraduate and graduate programs. Could you please express your thoughts on the relationship we seek between culture and education on one hand and economic and government affairs of Greece on the other hand? And could you be more specific on what your thoughts are on this matter?
Certainly. First, ευχαριστώ πολύ. I thank you, Professor Grispolakis, and I want to thank the Delphi Economic Forum.
You're very welcome.
Allowing. It's kind of strange that I studied economics as an undergraduate before I was won over to classics and history. So in some sense, I feel like I'm achieving finally what my economic education should have led to by being able to speak to this illustrious forum. And you all are being very tolerant in allowing a classicist and an ancient historian to speak on subjects like economics. So the Institute for Hellenic Culture and the Liberal Arts that I direct at ACG is part of the ACG 150, the American College of Greece strategic plan that we call ACG 150 to mark our 150-year anniversary, which will come in 2025. And from the foundation of the school in Asia Minor in the 19th century, we've tried to play a role to be a force for positive change in Greece. And so that ACG 150 plan is very much fits within this institutional history. The purpose of the plan itself is to bring the academic mission together with, and that means, of course, teaching and students and research, together with industry representatives and with the makers of public policy, so that we have a conversation between these three elements in an attempt to influence policy and spur economic growth in Greece in responsible and sustainable ways. Now, what I mean about responsibility goes to your question about the relationship between culture and education and education and government. You know, the ancient Greeks had absolutely no doubt about what the purpose of education was. The purpose of education was to create people capable of governing themselves and therefore capable of governing others. You know, it was basically to create good people. Education was quite tangible. It wasn't just preparation for a job. Mm-hmm. And of course, this kind of education that prepared someone for governing, for being a productive citizen, this became a standard in European education for centuries. And then when the university system was created, you know, after around 1100, because they expected everyone to be trained in these so-called liberal arts and these skills that were necessary for governing oneself, universities were able to specialize in things like law and theology and medicine. They expected everyone to already be educated in the liberal arts. it was really then American colleges that attempted to recapture this liberal arts education because, you know, at least in the United States, we figured out that everyone was really not educated in the liberal arts by the time they got to college. And we needed to make sure that we recaptured those skills that were essential for training citizens. But I think a lot of Americans, and maybe even some Greeks, don't appreciate the fact that the liberal arts education, as it's been created in the United States, has its origins in Greece and is really a fully Greek approach to education. So at the American College of Greece, we have this dual heritage from Greece and from the United States, which is obviously represented in our name. But because this strategic plan, ACG 150, is aimed at growing Greece specifically and at preparing Greece for the future, you know, we're very keen to make sure that our efforts are founded in Greek values. And those Greek values that we talk about, the ones we focus on, are drawn from the ancient past, the Byzantine past, and Greece's modern history. So from the ancient past, areti, which of course is often translated as virtue, it means excellence too. Epimeleia, which is a word that has a lot of resonance, but I like to think of it as basically stewardship. And then eleftheria, liberty or freedom. So our initiatives at ACG in this area are basically aimed in several directions. One of them is, of course, simply to educate the next generation of leaders and economic innovators, etc. And it's a strange kind of paradox that as the world has become more technological, technology itself has become in some ways a less effective way to educate people, because if you try to educate someone in a current technology, that technology is going to be obsolete almost from the moment they step out of the classroom. I like to tell students that the iPhone they have in their pocket is already 2 iPhones out of date, right? So it's a strange thing that technology actually encourages us to educate students in ways that are not focused on technology, but are focused on thought, that are focused on the ability to improvise in a rapidly changing environment. And I love this verb, avtoskediazo. You know, this is a verb that the historian Thucydides, my favorite author, likes to use. And it's a verb that I think beautifully captures what a modern citizen, a productive citizen in the economy, and a productive student needs to be able to do. So we've got to do our education, right? And secondly, we want to influence public policy. And we want to move Greece in a direction that's more open economically and is also responsible. You know, a freer economy is a better thing. I think the data is in on whether freer markets and freer economies produce more wealth, more prosperity for individual citizens. It's clear that that's the case. But I like to say that we are politically neutral in ACG 150, but not values neutral, okay? So we have our values, areti, epimeleia, eleftheria. But I don't believe that anything like a completely free market actually exists, because all markets are controlled by the values of the people who participate in them. So, you know, the establishment of values and responsibility go hand in hand with trying to open a market up and create more wealth, create more prosperity. And so we're trying to influence public policy, but influence it by keeping our eyes on these values that will move us in a direction that's responsible and sustainable. And then third, we're working in specific segments of the economy and in techniques that move across segments, cut across segments. So for example, our Research, Technology, and Innovation Network, which is led by Professor Konstantinos Papadias, seeks to support startups, support technology transfer into Greece and from Greece. And then we have centers of excellence in specific targeted economic segments, which are primed for growth in Greece. And we're talking about things like food, tourism and leisure, shipping and transportation, logistics. So we do all this under the umbrella of the Institute for Hellenic Growth and Prosperity. And that institute is led by the Emeritus Professor of Economics, Michalis Salidopoulos from the University of Athens, who was the former representative at the International Monetary Fund for Greece. And this institute, which is as I said, the umbrella of our Centers of Excellence in Research, Technology, and Innovation Network, seeks to influence public policy on the macro level, the economy as a whole, to create an environment within which these specific market segments can prosper. And we're very fortunate in that we're able to use all constituent parts of the American College of Greece. So that means not only our undergraduates and undergraduate faculty at Deree College, but also the graduate faculty and executive education that goes on at the Alba Graduate Business School. So it was probably predictable that as education became more specialized, that our leaders who are products of that education have tended to become more narrow and look to experts in specific fields to answer questions about policy. But of course, the problem with that is that the minute you choose an expert in a particular field, you privilege that field and you privilege that expertise over and against other areas of expertise. Well, what we need more of, I think, is conversation between experts and public policymakers, experts in different fields, and conversations with actual citizens. Yes, the forgotten element in this whole modern democratic pie, the individual citizen himself. I mean, after all, a vote is a statistic, but a voice is a real human being. And so I think listening to our citizens and forcing our experts to talk to each other is very important. So this is why we held a symposium just a few weeks ago on public health, the Greek economy, and civic liberty in the age of pandemics. How do we balance these things? We're essentially trying to ask the big question: what do we do in the next pandemic? It's pretty clear that lockdowns have had a devastating effect on the economy and on culture. And it's completely understandable why Western governments took this approach this time when we're facing something we've never seen before.
Sure.
But, we know more now. And the question I think we need to be focused on, one question we think at ACG 150 we need to be focused on, is how we're going to react in the next situation, and how do we get the people responsible for our civic liberties and for our economy and for our public health to speak to each other and to speak in terms that are driven by values and not just by raw data.
Exactly.
So, and so we are able to speak to our Institute of Public Health because we know we have to maintain public health. This is an absolute base necessity. The ancient Greeks understood that public health goes with political health. These two things are related to each other. But you can't really argue that one of them precludes the other. They have to be joined. And we got to keep our values in sight. So, for example, we talked to our Center of Excellence in Sustainability about how can we make decisions that achieve this balance and will preserve this world for the future, for our grandchildren. It's not just about making ourselves rich. We have to think about keeping preserving the world for the future. This is part of epimeleia.
No.
And so I'll just end by saying this is the balance we're trying to seek here. What we're essentially trying to push at ACG 150 is eudaimonia, is flourishing in the intellectual, cultural, and economic sense.
Professor Samons, unfortunately, the time is over. So I would like to thank you very much for the participation, for accepting the invitation, and for all the thoughts that you expressed for the forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Have a nice day.
You too.